Alright, what's up everybody, and welcome to episode number 33 of Uncovering Unexplained Mysteries for Wedded and As Dead Day, February 8th, 2017. Getting close to Valentine's Day. Yet another fucking holiday that sucks for people who don't have a significant other like myself. How are you doing, Mike?
I'm doing fine. I'm going to start studying for a learner's permit so I can go to driving school and learn how to drive a car.
Ooh.
So, yeah.
Moving on up. Moving on up. That's good. Why all of a sudden are you wanting to do all that? I thought you were happy doing public transport.
My parents kind of decided to help out. They think that'd be good for me. Also, it might open up some opportunities job-wise that I wouldn't really have.
It's kind of what I was saying last podcast, but didn't want to heed my advice on that. Oh no, definitely, dude. If you can drive, if you're mobile, I mean, your job opportunities will increase tenfold. And not only that, employers just like to see on your resume, because a lot of times one of the questions is, do you have not resume, but job application is, do you have a
driver's license?
Well, yeah, a reliable form of transportation. Because their biggest thing is they want to know that, hey, if I schedule this dude to come in at 9 o'clock, he's going to be here at 9 o'clock, and he's not going to have an excuse like, oh, the bus was late or whatever, you know. Because if you have your own vehicle, then you're a lot more accountable as to, hey, why weren't you here, you know. So yeah, I think that'll help you a lot.
Well, also it's for when I decide to go to WSU Vancouver, then it's a 20-minute drive instead of a hour and a half, 2-hour long bus ride to get there.
Oh wow.
So that would be 4 hours. That would be that would be ridiculous.
Jesus. Yeah, I just finished the Canadian food taste test video that I had been spending a while on. Thanks again to Morgan for sending the care package, but I also had to get some other...
Hopefully you didn't act like a hoser, eh?
Oh, hey, yeah, no, I think it kind of did. Well, no, I haven't pissed off any Canadians yet. Did cover their national anthem at the end of the video there. I did a Old Canada, like a punk rock version. So sorry if it went against any of your views there against covering your songs, but did the best I could. No, you can check that video out by liking my YouTube page or looking at my YouTube page, youtube.com/dancingwithghosts. I also just released a vlog as of today on there as well. Fear of missing out, otherwise known as FOMO. It's a thing, people. You constantly feel like you're missing out on things, so go check that out. You can also check out Mike's YouTube channel, where he just released a bunch of movie reviews and teasing his upcoming 10,000 subscriber landmark, where he's doing a fan Q&A. That's youtube.com/OCP Communications. Getting all that plugging stuff out of the way here. So we were alerted by like a billion people that season 2 of the original Robert Stack Unsolved Mysteries is on Amazon Prime.
Which is awesome. Woo! I haven't finished. I haven't finished season 1 yet, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm just about finished with season 1. It's hard for me to watch TV. That's a lot of time that I don't have nowadays, honestly, with how busy I am. 5 gigs a week and all that kind of stuff. But no, it is on there. They're doing a great job. You know, they almost released the second season as if the first season was like the old school way of it airing only once a week, you know, 1 episode per week. It was almost that length of time between the first season and second season that it was released. Almost like if you watched only 1 episode per week, you would be up to season 2 by now. So
that was good. And I was wondering though, because I was like, why are there like 7 seasons of the Dennis Farina show? And I don't even remember there being 7 seasons of that show. Do you?
No, I thought because the original Unsolved revamp versus the original video I did a few years ago. In that video, I did some research.
I think it was like 2 seasons,
yeah, it was
right?
supposed to be 2 seasons.
So what happened? Was there like 5 seasons, 5 that never aired, and then they finally aired on Amazon or something?
Well,
it's just bizarre. Or did they just split them up into seasons instead of?
Well, what they could have done was the 2 seasons on that aired on TV could have been like 23 episodes apiece, and maybe Amazon broke it down to smaller chunks. I don't know, but who?
That's not what it looks like, to be honest. But yeah,
who the fuck is that for at this point?
I know.
I mean, you have the original Unsolved Mysteries. What the new one came from? You have the daddy. You have the original, the good one. What? If you're gonna watch a shitty, watered down crime show, why wouldn't you watch any of the other better ones like CSI or whatever? Like, why would you watch the revamped Unsolved Mysteries when you could watch the original that actually had its own tone and its own kind of thing going for it? So yeah, I don't know why. That's weird to me.
I didn't even know why they even put it up there, to be honest.
Well, I can see why they would put it up there when there wasn't the original, but now that the original's up there, it just needs to be bumped off into obscurity because there's literally it's the same segments and they're paired down. I don't know. It's very weird indeed.
It's strange.
So
also, speaking of Unsolved Mysteries related stuff, this is something I found out about a few days ago when I was looking on Wikipedia, checking out, trying to figure out about the revamp, really. I was looking at, was there 7 seasons? And I'm like, oh, no, there wasn't. And then I found out that there were actually Unsolved Mysteries TV movies that were spin-offs of certain cases that were covered on the show. The first one was called Escape from Terror, the Teresa Stamper story. And the second one is called From the Files of Unsolved Mysteries, Voice from the Grave. And then there was a third one called The Sleepwalker Killing, which also had From the Files of Unsolved Mysteries title prefix in front of it. And that one has Hilary Swank in it, I believe.
Oh, wow.
The Sleepwalker Killing. Now, that's one that's actually available on DVD under the title The Sleepwalker Killing. Now, what's interesting about these is I believe it was John Cosgrove or more. Like, they actually did, like, they were involved with the show, with these TV movies, and I believe some of them even directed some of the films.
Yeah, why not? I mean, you have this successful show, Unsolved Mysteries. I mean, it's ripe for TV movie adaptations. I would imagine that they would have aired on Lifetime, right?
They aired on NBC at first, and then they reruns aired on Lifetime.
Oh, that is really cool. Yeah, so that's a piece of information out there for you guys to check out. I haven't seen any of them yet. Have you checked any of them out?
I haven't checked any of them out yet either. They're on YouTube, so I was thinking maybe, Josh and I someday down the road, maybe we could, talk about them.
You're going to let me review a movie with you, Mike?
Yeah.
I thought that was your thing.
Well, it's Unsolved Mysteries related, so.
Yeah, you kind of need me in there.
Yeah.
I'm the counterweight. It's not really a counterweight with us. We kind of agree on a lot of the same stuff, which makes this show not as interesting. But hey, maybe we can start writing like scripts. Like this podcast can become scripted, and we can like make drama, like fake drama, like they do on the reality TV shows.
I would advise against that.
We can I can pit myself against Mike, and we can like have like an on podcast drama thing going on. Where we get into an argument, and Mike. You hear him throw down his headphones and storm out. Fuck this!
Fuck this bullshit!
I'm out! I'm done! And then, like, the next...
So speaking of crazy Unsolved Mysteries related stuff, I saw this film called Hurricane Bianca with my mom because she's a fan of RuPaul's Drag Race. And the movie stars a few of the people who are actually on the show. One of them is, Bianca Del Rio. Now... This is a movie that actually has a good message. It preaches tolerance, for homosexuals and things like that, and I like that. Now, I did not expect this scene to happen, though, because there's a line in the film where Bianca's getting carried away by this redneck into the woods, and she says, "What is this Unsolved Mysteries bullshit?"
Oh, wow, that's funny.
Yeah, so I thought that was worth mentioning.
I'm always
because I was definitely not expecting that.
Yeah, I'm always curious as to like what exactly is the like social impact in modern day of the show, because like we kind of live in this bubble where I surround myself with all things Unsolved Mysteries, and the fans are constantly posting Unsolved Mysteries related things on our page, so I know it means something to them. But I wonder, just in popular culture, like where does it still stand as a show? Is it seen as one of those kind of, you know, decent shows of the 90s that's kind of like, oh, bad acting and bad special effects and the host had a scary voice and that's kind of all it's known for? Or does it have a more deeper and significant impact, I wonder?
I would think I would think that it has a deeper and more significant impact. I mean, look at how many 5-star reviews are for the first season on Amazon Prime.
Yeah. Well, Matthew McConaughey got his start on there, so... Well,
there was a lot of other, you know, DPs and other directors and things like that, and some other actors and actresses. One of them, I believe, was Stephanie Weir, who was from Mad TV. She was in one of the reenactments I remember seeing.
Cheryl Hines was in one of them, who played Cheryl David, Larry David's wife in Curb Your Enthusiasm. She was in one of them.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So anyway, let's get to the stories here. We're going to start off the first one. We haven't really talked about the order, but I guess I'm going to do shuffle on this one. First story is going to be about a little boy named Jared Peters. I saw this one, and I thought this would be a good one to talk about. This one is yet another one where the grandma or some kind of
the mother.
Well, no, this is
the mother of the daughter who had her kid taken away.
Yeah, Jared's grandmother.
Yeah, exactly.
What I initially said.
I know.
Don't you correct me, Mike. Drama time. Drama. Okay, now here we go. This is yet another case where the grandma, aka mother, she interferes and really does some crazy shit. And it's just like, what is this lady's Anyway, let's get into the story and then I'll bitch about the grandmother. December 11th, 1990, Hobbs, New Mexico. A young mother, accompanied by her second husband, holds a lonely roadside vigil. She's waiting on her mother and her 4-year-old son. By nightfall, there's still no sign of them. Quote, "An hour went by and we waited. Every time a car would pass, we'd get nervous, but I just couldn't leave, and I couldn't go back home. I knew she took off with him. I knew she wasn't coming back." By midnight, LaDonna was confronted with the disturbing reality that her mother had kidnapped her son. The background of this carefully planned abduction is almost as bizarre as the abduction itself, and that is an understatement.
Yeah.
Jared Peters was 4 years old when he was abducted by his grandmother. He was born on November 5th, 1986. His parents were still teens, and by that time, the marriage had fallen apart pretty much. By the time Jared was born. LaDonna took a full-time job and went back to school. She asked her mother, Pat, to help care for Jared. Pat agreed, even though she had been violently opposed to the divorce. Quoting LaDonna here, "My mother was the type of person, as long as she was getting her way, everything was fine. We were good friends as long as I was doing what she thought I should be doing. But when I separated with Brian," which was the husband, "I moved in with my dad, and she thought, well, if you can't do what I think you should do, you're just terrible. So she went from my friend to my worst enemy." Yet again, an understatement. LaDonna would have been horrified if she had known how her son was spending his days with Pat. Pat began using home video cassettes to expose him to satanic imagery and the occult. Quote, "There were moments when Jared would come back not acting like himself. He acted like there was something wrong and he needed to rely on me, but something was holding him back. Over a period of months, Pat began taping odd conversations with Jared. It was all part of a master plan. In September of 1989, Pat began playing edited tapes of the recordings with Jared to a receptive audience, LaDonna's estranged husband, Brian." And I loved the scene that they shot of, it shows Pat, LaDonna's mother, in this darkly lit, like 1970s style, like kitchen with Brian, the estranged husband, and just the lighting and the mood was just classic Unsolved Mysteries. You know, it just.
Well, I love the scene where the kid is just sitting there on the floor watching the satanic tapes. So they just put together like this little, because it's such an eerie and surreal moment. You're just like, what? And it's like, it reminds me of the Bobby Baskin case. It's like another kooky grandmother. What is up with this?
Yeah, and
like you would think like it'd be like one case. All right, one case is the exception of some grandmother who decides to blame Satanism and Satan on certain things that are happening with their grandchildren, and then they want the grandchild, so then they make shit up and get custody and so on. And you would think like, oh, you know, that wouldn't happen again. But then you have this case, and then you're just like, what is up with this? This is crazy.
I believe it was like episode 3 when we talked about Kurt McFall, and you brought up how in the 80s there was this whole
satanic panic.
Yeah, you weren't bullshitting about that, because that is weirdly enough, because you never really hear about it anymore. That weirdly enough has been a theme in a lot of these segments that we covered. Is some form of Satanism. I keep thinking of Dana Carvey's character in Saturday Night Live,
exactly.
the church lady. Satan, the devil. You know who else has lips? The devil.
I don't know. Perhaps Satan.
But yeah, dude, like in the segment, they're literally showing this little boy, and there's like a pentagram with the goat head in the pentagram, and they're showing like this.
You got Anton LaVey, you know, the guy who's the head of the Church of Satan.
Yeah, my dog doesn't like what we're talking about right now. he takes umbrage with Satan,
or maybe he's possessed by Satan.
I think he is. I think he is Legion. Honestly, I really do. So. You know, Brian, as she's playing, and by the way, I mean, Pat, you know, she's kind of a crafty old bitch, because she's editing these tapes. Like, she'd be like, you know, like, did you have a good day today, or something like that? Or,
she's coaching the kid like Bobby Baskin's grandmother.
Yeah,
did.
She'd get the kid to say yes, and then she'd edit the tape together to where it'd be like, she'd ask like, did they touch you?
Yeah,
and then they'd edit in.
She was like a total bitch too, because she was all like, "Don't nod your head.
You need to say yes.
Yeah, you need to say yes."
Yeah. So Brian was kind of in disbelief, but Pat was like, the tapes are right here. He's saying it. So
I would have been like, I'm sorry. This is too absurd. I don't believe any of this. I'm sorry. I really don't.
Brian, the dad, said Jared would say there was a mean house and this monster was mean to him and take him to a pool like a bathtub and molest him and spank him and make him do things that were bad. And when I heard this, I was mad. I mean, I was very angry. At Pat's urging, Brian took action. During one of his son's visits, Brian decided to not let Jared go back home with LaDonna. LaDonna said, I went to my mother's house to try to talk to her and find out what was going on with Brian, because I know that my mother and Brian had been talking and had been staying at my mom's house quite a bit.
Now, the recreation there... I think the reenactment there. I think it's LaDonna actually acting. I think.
Yeah, I think it's the real.
She's not a good actress.
Not great. Not great.
It's pretty bad.
I myself did notice that.
Or she, knocks on the door and comes in and starts speaking to the actress who's playing her mom, and yeah, it was pretty noticeably terrible. I have to be honest.
Yeah, they say at the very beginning of the old broadcast, at least, whenever possible, we got the real victims or whatever to participate in the recreated events, and that was the case in this. And it is nice in a way, because you feel like it's less of a reenactment and more of like, oh, we're seeing what really happened right here in front of our eyes instead of a recreation. So
yeah, but I mean, when the acting is that bad, then it does kind of shatter the illusion, so to speak. But
well, and then there's the golden rule of Unsolved Mysteries: the better the acting, the less interviews are used, and the less dialogue of Robert Stack narrating over it is used. The worse the acting, the more interview audio is used, the more voiceover work is used to cover up the bad acting. That's kind of their rule. I mean, they've even stated that. I think John Cosgrove stated that one time. Like, that's kind of their golden rule. So LaDonna went on to say that she just kept getting crazier and crazier. The mother, Pat, she said, I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat. I called constantly to find out what was going on, and they would never tell me nothing, which is her words. I know that's a double negative. They would never tell me nothing, so that means that they would tell you something? Anyway. At a custody hearing in December of 1989, Pat Farmer's, her last name is Farmer, by the way, Pat Farmer's audio tapes of conversations with Jared were entered into evidence. LaDonna and her fiancé Neil were accused of emotional and sexual abuse and involvement in a satanic cult. Which is like the Bobby Baskin case. Yeah, exactly.
Very similar.
Very similar. For the first time, LaDonna realized the full scope of her mother's manipulation. Quote, my mother made it out to look like I was the devil in disguise, like I was the worst thing on this earth. Why would she try to hurt me like this is beyond me. I'd never expected her to accuse me of being a devil worshiper. She knew that I'd always been involved in church. The things that were said about me were so embarrassing and such a letdown, and it hurt my feelings so bad. I was just at a total loss for anything to say.
Yeah. I mean, it even leaves me speechless just thinking about, like, what if my mom, it's like, did this to my family? It's I just can't even, I can't even imagine it. It's just unimaginable to me. How could a mother do that to their daughter?
And it seems like, It seems like whenever these kind of accusations and stuff get thrown at you, regardless of how ridiculous it sounds on the mother's end, the judge has to take it all into consideration.
Yeah.
So even though these things are being levied against you, you reacting like, what? Are you serious? A devil worshiper? And like laughing, that's not really convincing enough to the judge. You have to prove that you are not doing that stuff. And
how do you do that?
Right.
How do you prove that you're not doing this?
Yeah.
How do you prove that this tape is bullshit?
You can't just tell a judge, come on, judge, come on. Really? Because, I mean, come on, judge, really is not really a defense.
No, that's not a defense.
It's not a legal defense, unfortunately. It should be, but it's not. Because the judge has to look at it like, well, maybe she is a devil.
Well, she used the come on, really, judge defense. So,
Your Honor, I would like to enter into evidence the come on, judge, really defense. Right now, I will exhibit this. Judge, really? Come on. Okay, well, he used the come on, judge, really defense, and that does actually make a lot of sense in this case. And, Pat, you kind of sound like a fucking idiot, so rule in defense of LaDonna. Anyway,
Dude.
It seemed like all of it was being taken away. All my dreams and hopes for him were coming crashing down on top of me. I kept thinking they were going to change their minds, but they didn't. LaDonna was allowed to visit her son for just 1 hour a week under the watchful eye of a social worker. LaDonna said, I tried to make him feel like he was the best thing in the world, which he was to me. We'd play, and I'd take him new toys, and we'd have a good time, but it was just so hard to leave. It was so hard to walk away from him. Brian was also allowed to see Jared once a week, and during one of the visits, the truth of Pat's deception began to emerge. Quoting Brian, it was just us two, and we were having a good time, and he was finally opening up to me. He said Neil, which was LaDonna's fiancé, he said Neil and LaDonna weren't hurting him, and that they weren't doing anything that Pat had told him to say, and basically said that Pat was telling him to say all these things. When Brian heard that, he immediately contacted the sheriff's department. Pat retaliated by charging that he, too, was into Satanism. Satan!
Satan?
Satan! You're into Satan, too! They're all Satanists! Everyone's a Satanist.
It's like the Salem witch trials, but
yeah, really.
Back then, now you would think, that would never happen, but it's the same kind of thing, but it just doesn't have people getting burned at the stake.
Well, thankfully in this case it didn't happen because the sheriff's investigators determined that Pat's allegations were groundless. After 2 months, LaDonna was reunited with Jared. However, for some God knows reason, the court did grant Pat, the grandma, 1 day a week visitation.
Really made me scratch my head. I was like, you granted her visitation rights after she's making these accusations and doing all of this to try to take the kid away from her mother? I don't think she deserves visitation rights.
I honestly didn't know that grandparents had any kind of entitlement to visit their grandchildren whatsoever, honestly.
Yeah, I didn't know that either.
I mean, to me, I thought it is the mother and the father have the rights for visitation, and anybody outside of that immediate family is just kind of accessory, like they just... If they want the grandparents to see the kid, then the grandparents didn't get to see. Then the grandparents get to see the kid. Now, if there's some kind of a legally like a guardian kind of situation where the Pat was made a legal guardian, the Unsolved Mysteries didn't really go into that. But maybe if you're a legal guardian, legally you have some grounds for visitation rights. But they didn't say any of that. And again, I don't think that grandparents I didn't know they had that right to have visitation. Apparently they do, according to this case. So on December 11th, 1990, a scheduled visitation day for Pat was coming up. She wanted to take Jared on an out-of-town trip.
To Lubbock.
To Lubbock. Somewhere in Texas, I'm guessing.
Yep, Lubbock, Texas.
So LaDonna
shopping.
LaDonna said we were talking and she wanted to take Jared to Lubbock, and I told her no, and she got furious. And I said, I'm sorry, you just can't take him out. And she said, all right, and we agreed to meet out at the intersection, and we agreed for me to pick him up at 9 o'clock. Pat never brought Jared back. She and Jared have not been seen since. Quoting LaDonna here, and it's just so unbelievable. After all that we went through to get him back, she would be so hateful and so crazy and so mean to take him away again. But we have an update. And this update was even embedded in the show, so it happened, during that time. On August 20th, 1992, Pat and her grandson were taken into custody by the FBI and Salt Lake City police. Jared would finally be going home. Informed that Jared was safe, LaDonna drove all the way from New Mexico to Utah to welcome him back. She was stoked to have him back. The dad was stoked to have him back too. Those are my words, obviously. They didn't use the word stoked. Today,
can you imagine Robert Stack saying that?
They were totally stoked to have him back. They said it was a righteous time.
Excellent.
Today, Brian and LaDonna share the hope that the events of the last 2 years won't have a lasting effect on Jared. Well, let's see here.
Satanism.
1992, the Super Nintendo had been out for a year. Bunch of great games were out on that system. You had the regular NES where games were still easy to come by.
So just get him an NES or SNES.
Arcades were in their heyday in 1992. He was born in 86, so that makes him 6 years old, the prime age to be getting into all that. Music was still like... people gave a shit about it and bought music, so live acts were in no short supply. Great live acts touring the nation in 92. What kind of movies were out in the early 90s, late 80s that kids could really enjoy?
Well, Mike? I mean, 92, I think Aladdin came out soon.
Fucking Aladdin.
Period, if I remember correctly.
What are some other good early 90s movies?
Well, I know, I'm fond of the Ninja Turtles live action movies, but those came out. The first film came out in 1990. The second one came out in 1991. So, those are already on home video at the time, so you could probably watch them on VHS. So there's a lot of, I don't know if T2 is really kid-friendly, but a lot of kids saw it anyway.
So yeah, I think Jared turned out just fine. I think he turned out just fine.
He wasn't in it as long as Bobby. I think he was only with the grandmother for like 2 months or something. So it wasn't like the long period of time that Bobby was with his grandparents. And he actually ended up getting taken back to his mom in a fairly short amount of time. So whatever brainwashing or whatever that was going on there could have easily been erased or put on the back burner in the back of his head.
Well, gee.
Unlike, with Bobby.
What was Mike talking about when he mentioned Bobby? Well, I'm glad you asked, folks. If you would like to hear an extra segment called The Kidnapping of Bobby Baskin, basically this case times 10 in intensity, you can become...
I'm pissed off. So.
And Mike's pissed off, which is another added bonus. You can listen to Mike solo rant on that on our Patreon as a bonus segment to our loyal Patreon fans. If you want to visit us at patreon.com/uncovering unexplained mysteries, I think that's in the $3 tier if you want to donate $3. Yeah.
You also have another bonus segment that I did by myself, which ties into the case that we talked about last week, to the case of the crazy lady with the evil eye.
Charles Southern, yeah. There's an additional case on that. But yeah, it's worth it because Mike actually made that rant just as an aside. He didn't even think it was going to have anything to do with the podcast. So he got really into it. He got really passionate about it, really angry.
And then I had to remove it. It's controversial.
Yeah, it's kind because Bobby Baskin got in touch with you, and that was kind of we've generally had positive experiences with people from the show being on our podcast, but that along with the Cosgrove Moyer incident was one of the more negative ones. Although he didn't bring legal.
It wasn't
shit
as negative as John and Terry, but it was just. I don't know. The controversy it was bringing on my channel was just I didn't really want it.
We honestly figured it would have been better to have made it a Patreon thing to where only a very few people can even access it, and that way it's kind of out of the you can't get to it unless you become a contributor to Patreon. And
I still feel the same way that I did in that video. Maybe I was harsh with some of the words that I said, but I still think. I still think that's kind of how it went down, but that's just my personal opinion.
So if you want to check that out, I would recommend it.
I don't know. I don't have anything else to say about this case, except I'm glad that the kid got reunited with his mom. And
this was a good one. It had it had everything. It had weird satanic shit at the beginning, which was interesting. Had a crazy grandmother.
With the grandmother. I like the quote from the daughter where she says, she's like your best friend, but then she was my best friend, but then, I never thought that she could become, my worst enemy. You never think about that with your mom. And that's honestly pretty scary if you think about it. Like, what if your mom turned on you? Like, I couldn't handle that. Like, she's a support beam for me right now. So,
these old ladies need shit to do with their time, apparently, and sometimes they turn that into a malevolent thing. So let's go into our next segment here, which is one off of the Amazon Prime.
Yeah, it's from season 1. It's from, I think, episode 4, and it's the second segment, I believe, after the Queen Mary segment, and this one is about Joe Shepard. Now, it's a wanted segment, and I wanted to talk about this one because, man, this guy is a scumbag, despicable piece of shit, and also is a very memorable segment to me because of how the body was discovered and where it was discovered. Now, Joe Shepard of Tellico Plains, Tennessee, is wanted for the murders of 15-year-old Roxanne Woodson and 14-year-old Kathy Cowers. On the night of February 27, 1978, Roxanne and Shepard, then 26, were in the car with two friends when Shepard tried to make sexual advances on Roxanne. Roxanne!
You don't have to put on the red
light. Then 26 were in the car together, two friends, and he tried to make sexual advances on Roxanne. She refused, and he tried to attack her. She escaped the car and ran into the woods. Shepard chased after her, and Roxanne was never seen again. The night after Roxanne was reported missing, authorities went to Shepard's home to bring him in for questioning. Shepard asked if he could change his shoes, and the officers let him. While in his room, Shepard reached for his shotgun instead of for, the tie, instead of for the shoelaces on his shoes. He reached for his shotgun. The officers noticed this and fired 2 warning shots at him. Eventually, they were able to wrestle the gun away from him, and then he was then brought in for interrogation. Shepard told authorities that on the night that Roxanne vanished, he tried to seduce her, but was unsuccessful. He did admit to chasing her into the woods, but claimed he had lost track of her and couldn't find her. And Shepard was charged with assaulting a police officer, but released on bond. Now, this is important because that's his first story. That's his first account of what happened. Hundreds of searchers tried to locate Roxanne, but were unsuccessful. After several days, the search was then called off. And on April 8, 1978, Shepard's mother noticed her dogs around a certain pile of debris in the backyard. Now, this is such a gruesome sight. Now, the music is definitely used really well here, but also, I can't help it. Like they're like focusing in on these dogs sniffing around, and there's this dog that has like these it has not been neutered, so it's just dog balls, just right front and center.
I did not notice that in this segment, Mike.
Yeah,
that was some kind of Freudian thing for you, I think.
No, absolutely
not. You have
not.
A fascination with dog balls. Admit it.
No. I think it's because I watch them on my computer. My face is like super right close to it, so I'm not like. So it's one of those things. I watched it for like the 3rd time, and then I noticed that. So I didn't notice it from the first time around or anything like that. I just kind of notice little things like that when I watch segments. Did you wish that it had been in 3D, so it would have been 3D dog balls? No, I don't.
Okay,
absolutely not. No way. That's just gross. So that's the main thing that kind of I was like, that's gross.
Well, I thought you were gonna go towards like the chick's hand sticking out of the pile of debris. Well,
that's you, absolutely. So I'm saying you have the dog balls in your face, and then you have the hands that are sticking up out of the ground.
It's kind of life in a way. It's kind of a metaphor for life. It's like dog balls in your face and a dead hand, and then that's it. That's really all there is in life.
Dog balls and dead hands.
Yeah, that's a blues song waiting to be written.
Yeah, so Shepard's mother noticed her dogs around a certain pile of debris in the backyard. She moved some of the debris and saw 2 hands sticking out of the ground. Now, this is Shepard's mom's place. I mean, come on. Can you just imagine being in her shoes there? Just like, what are the dogs sniffing around at? Oh, my God.
Honey, did you kill some prostitutes again? No, Mama, they wasn't prostitutes. They's just regular women. When you gonna go to church and meet you a nice church girl and stop killing them women? Soon, Mama. Yeah, so I don't know.
So she moved some of the debris, saw the 2 hands, and authorities determined that the body, which had been partially buried in the ground, was that of Roxanne Woodson. At that point, authorities charged Shepard with first-degree murder. Shepard was arrested at his mother-in-law's home. During the second interrogation, Shepard then changed his story. He claimed that he was chasing Roxanne in the woods and she fell and hit her head on a rock. Bullshit. He told investigators that he panicked and returned to the car with his friends. He said that he returned later that night and put Roxanne back in his car. He then took her back to his house and buried her in the backyard. What went through his head that he thought that for a second that the cops are going to buy that bullshit? Well, you're not going to call 911 or an ambulance or anything. You're just like, oh, she's dead. I panicked. I'm going to bury her in my mom's yard. What? Well, I didn't want the animals to get to her. I'm sorry. Bullshit. After being charged with Roxanne's murder, Shepard was implicated in a Kathy Clowers' 1976 disappearance. When questioned, Shepard stated that he not only knew Kathy, but he also knew where she was buried. He then took the investigators to the location, and they eventually found her clothing and remains. Both victims had their pants wrapped around their heads. And on April 17th, 1978, actually before I finished up on that, I wanted to mention the investigator who was there, and he has a recollection of what happened on the scene, and it was so chilling when he says that it was like he was proud of himself, that he showed no emotion, no remorse, and it was like he was proud of himself that he had provided a body.
Yeah, your typical sociopath, who doesn't, who can't, they have no capacity to have emotions in the normal, appropriate way that a quote unquote normal human being would have. Like
emotion, yeah.
Yeah, any of your other serial killers are
robotic in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So very inhuman. No compassion.
A mouth-breathing moron.
Well, not really like that, but it's still just as unsettling. Now, on April 17, 1978, Shepard was formally indicted with the murder of Kathy Clowers. On July 17, 1978, while awaiting trial in the county jail, Shepard escaped with 2 other inmates after one of the inmates feigned an illness and locked in the jailer. That
was a cool scene. I would not brush over that scene. That was a cool scene how they did that. Yeah, it was a cool scene
how they did that with reenactment. Now, I don't think prisons are like that nowadays.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I've seen that Almost Got Away With It show too many times to...
Yeah. That's another good one. The 2 other inmates were ultimately caught, but Joe Shepard, however, has remained missing. But there's an update. He was captured. Shepard was arrested in London, Ontario, Canada, under the alias Joseph Tripp after a viewer contacted police. At the time, Shepard was living in a government housing project with his common-law wife and 2 children. In 1991, he was returned to prison in Tennessee. He was convicted of the second-degree murder of Clowers, but after an appeal, the charge was lowered to involuntary manslaughter. In the spring of 1991, he was convicted of the first-degree murder of Woodson and sentenced to death, and which was later commuted to a life sentence. Shepard died in prison of natural causes in 2010.
Which is good, but why do I get the sense that this guy kind of like didn't?
He might have killed even more people than he was convicted for too. It sounds like he might have been a serial killer, because if he's done more than one, victim, they all had their pants wrapped around their heads.
And how are these people, like, and this is not the first time I've heard this, how are these people able to find wives and, like, okay, yeah. It's like they do this crazy, like, fringe of society shit, and it's like almost only at that point do they like snap out of it and go, oh, that's crazy, I shouldn't have done that. I want to run from the law now and start a normal life and have a wife and kid. That's happened so many times where somebody kills somebody and then they go on the run, they have a wife and kids. And that even happened with a woman, this woman who, I forget the exact name of the segment, but she went on this like spree of bank robberies, and she was an accessory to this guy that she was with, and she went off and she became a fabric of the society that the city that she moved to, started a family, had grandkids and shit for 30 years, went unarrested, and then they finally caught up with her and arrested her ass and her.
Well, yeah.
How did these people do this shit? Like what? Like it's like they snap and then they snap back. Like that's so weird.
It is strange. It is one of the definite mysteries with these type of individuals. It does make you pause. Now, one that really stands out to me is the BTK killer, and how for years and years and years he eluded police, and then he'd been living this quaint life. He was a pastor at a local church.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you got Gacy, who's a fucking clown.
Yeah.
With balloons. Although, that does seem to make a lot of sense that a clown would be, like murderous, But maybe that's where we got that stereotype from. That
we probably got that is from Gacy.
Yeah, that clowns are secretly evil, because maybe nobody really thought that before, Well,
you got Bundy, who was actually a really good-looking guy. And, he was actually on the Dating Game.
Oh, yeah, I remember that, yeah. Well, I don't remember it from the airing. Yeah. I remember hearing about it. So, that was a pretty short one.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's anything else left to say about it. I mean, I'm glad the guy got
it's just
caught.
one I wanted to mention is because of the whole thing with the body buried on the mother's property. I just thought, and the fact that he was just so cold.
Yeah.
When he's just like, oh, there you go, his body.
Yeah, I mean, there's I forget what I was watching, but I was watching something about serial killers, and they were trying to
Making of a Murderer.
No, they discovered some way of being able to determine who was a likely murderer or sociopath and who wasn't, and they would sit them in front of this almost like viewfinder, and they put their head into it, and they showed these words that would have emotionally charged reactions like rape. You know, they'd show other words, like I think they showed like the N-word or some shit on there, and people would and they would like have all these diodes on these people's heads, and they'd show their brain waves, and most normal people would react, their brain waves would go up when they would see these emotionally charged words. And then they would have I think they had some like jailed like murderer or something. They had him do it, and there was nothing, flatline for every word. No,
interesting.
No emotional reaction to any of those words. This is one of the many kind of theories that's been thrown out about killers, serial killers especially, is that they also tend to have a much lower resting heart rate than normal people. And they almost need to kill and to go out on these conquests to raise their blood pressure and to raise their pulse up to where they even feel alive, because they're so they feel so much more I guess I don't know, sedentary, or like I don't know, that these are just some of the things I've heard over time, and they could all be complete bullshit, but I know there's something to the psychology of a murderer, because it's just not the norm.
No, it's not. It is not.
So there's got to be something to it, but do I know what it is? No, I do not. All I know is that Mike knows where Bigfoot is, and he's not telling people. Oh, look how quiet he is over there. Not even trying to defend it anymore. Oh.
There's nothing to defend.
Yeah, I know. There's nothing to defend. You live in Bigfoot's backyard in Vancouver, Washington, and you say you know nothing. Sure, buddy. Moving on to our last case of Tommy Gibson. This is one me and Mike had been wanting to talk about for a long time, and I know we've referenced it.
We've referenced it like numerous times already, but we're just like, oh, that one case, and we didn't really remember exactly what the name was of the kid who went missing, or the sheriff, deputy sheriff, who was accused of killing his kid.
Yeah, spoiler free, by the way, and you're not going to find out what happens till the end here. This guy was accused of killing his kid. What a horrible accusation. I mean, he says he didn't do it. You know, let's dig into this. Although I think if you listen to our previous podcast, we probably already spoiled it. But whatever.
Yeah, we already spoiled it.
Whatever.
Hey.
For new listeners. I love how I try to do like a professional thing here, and every time I try, it just blows up in my face.
I think it adds to the charm of the podcast, though.
That's really the only positive thing you can really say about it. It adds to the charm, and that's really all there is to be said. But
this is still a great case because it's just one of those things where you got to hear it to believe it.
You do, and it's juicy, like a steak that's cooked medium.
Stop talking about food.
Oh, I know. I'm getting hungry.
I got a strict no food talk rule for the rest of this episode.
Same here. Okay, so on March 1991, Azalea, Oregon, a 2.5-year-old boy is missing. For 3 days, hundreds of searchers scour the ragged terrain for any sign of the toddler. They find nothing. The missing boy is Tommy Gibson, son of Douglas County Sheriff's Deputy Larry Gibson. Quote, I always felt like I could handle any situation, and since then, I haven't been the same. None of us have. That would be the father, Larry Gibson, talking about the disappearance of his son. 6 weeks after Tommy disappeared, the case took a chilling and dramatic turn. Authorities began to perceive Larry Gibson as not a grieving father, but as a prime suspect in Tommy's disappearance. Last May, the Oregon State Police filed this 31-page affidavit which concludes, quote, Larry Gibson is the only person with the opportunity and known motive to cause the disappearance of Tommy Gibson. This pits Larry against the state police. Unsolved Mysteries investigated both sides of this story, and we're going to begin with Larry Gibson's account on the morning of March 18th, 1981. Okay, now Larry's saying, when I came out of the house, Tommy was playing in the front yard in front of the porch. I stopped by and talked to him and told him to stay in the yard and wait for his sister, and then they could play when she was out. I was carrying a handgun with me, a .45 automatic, because I was going off into the mountains alone. I started to cross the yard into the timber down the fence. Just as I was doing that, I saw a stray cat wandering around, and we were having a lot of problems with stray cats in that area. Me and the landlord tried to take the cats to the Humane Society, and the Humane Society didn't have room for them. And finally, we got to where we had to start shooting them. I waited until I was in a fairly safe spot, and I shot at this stray cat. I thought I had hit it, but then when I went to check on it, I saw that it ran away, and it went down the hill. So I knew that I had missed.
I'm just thinking about that. Like, how many fucking cats do you have on your property if you have to resort to shooting them?
Yeah, I know. It's kind of a weird thing to think of, some kind of like harem of stray cats just taking over, out there where you live in Oregon.
I mean, you hear of packs of dogs, but like just stray cats everywhere that are such a threat. Actually, that they need to be shot.
When I lived back a few years ago, when I lived in another area of Jacksonville, it was in this neighborhood, this more kind of, I guess, older neighborhood. Not one of those kind of like suburban neighborhoods where all the houses were built within the last 20 years. These are houses that were built in the 20s and 30s and all, and they'd all been renovated, whatever. Historic part of town, I guess you could say. And there actually was a glut of black cats that were all over this neighborhood. They'd be in the backs of our yards. They'd be hiding under our houses. But, I mean, they didn't really bother me. I thought they were kind of cute. I mean, I wasn't going to feed them or anything, but they were just chilling, They were just...
I mean, that's what I'm saying. Why did they need to be shot? I mean, that's the kind of...
I mean, unless they were getting into, like, the garbage and they were...
Yeah.
I mean, that's really the only thing I can think of.
Or like swiping at the kid or something, or they were dangerous strays, like that awful movie Strays with Timothy Busfield. I'm sorry. Nothing you can do, no matter how many unique camera shots or angles or whatever you do, you're not going to make cats scary to me. I'm sorry. I just... No.
Did you do a review of that one?
I haven't, but it is one of the worst films I remember seeing. Now, I know there are people who are fans of it, to each their own. Pussy doesn't scare me. I'm sorry.
Pussy not only does not scare me, it sometimes entices me. Oh! Went for the easy joke. Went for the easy joke. Hey. What's worse than having a lobster on your piano, a crab on your organ? Hey, I got 1 million of them. I'll be here all night. Sorry about that, folks. Back to the regularly scheduled program. So I've described to you the situation that Larry has laid out, to where he shot at a stray cat and the stray cat ran away. So then his, at that point, wife Judith said, I heard Larry shoot the cat and I was looking right in the area where he had left, and my thought came to my mind was, gee, I hope Larry knows where Tommy is. And shortly after the shot, in a matter of seconds, I heard Tommy playing on the porch. After Larry shot at the cat, he looked for the used shell casing. After being unable to find it, he began jogging. Quote, I jogged for time, not for distance. I went 22 minutes up the driveway and turned around and came back home. Larry was gone for just over 47 minutes. Judy asked me if Tommy had been with me, and then she told me that she hadn't seen him for over half an hour, and that she, my daughter and brother, had been searching for him. This is what Larry said. Within an hour, 24 people were searching for Tommy. It is during this most crucial time in the search for Tommy that investigators feel Larry Gibson's actions seemed extremely suspicious. Quoting Larry again, "It was getting time for me to go to work, and I felt that we were going to find Tommy in an area that would be embarrassingly obvious. I really didn't think at the time that it was going to be a big deal and that he'd be fine, so I went in the house, took a fast shower, and got into uniform." Larry was told by his supervisor, however, not to report to work. A short time later, while searchers combed the woods, Larry drove off in his patrol car. Again, quoting Larry, "At this time, I began to become suspicious that someone had taken Tommy off my property, so I got into my patrol car and drove 2 miles to the Southbound rest area off I-5. And I checked the rest area and checked the area and no one had dropped off Tommy in any kind of condition. And then I checked the northbound rest area and went back to the house for a total of 5 miles." End quote. Now, you know, if in his defense, if his kid goes missing, you know, and his deputy or the sheriff tells him not to report into work, fuck you, man. I'm going off. I'm looking for my kid. I don't care what you tell me. My kid's life is more important. You know, I'm going off searching for him. I don't have to. I don't got to account. I don't got to check in with you. You know, you're not a part of this family. So I get that. I get him going off anyway and doing that.
Did he have to use his patrol car though? I mean, couldn't he technically have done all this stuff off duty?
If I'm looking for my kid and I'm already a police officer, you know, I might take the patrol car just as a form of gravitas, you know, like I'm the law, bitch. Where's this kid? You know, instead of just taking my normal car. But then we got Lieutenant Rusty Simpson of the Oregon State Police who chimed in and said, "Days after the disappearance of Tommy Gibson, Larry was interviewed by the FBI out of Eugene, Oregon. He told them at that time that he never left the property after returning from his job. Subsequent investigations determined that there was a discrepancy in mileage in his patrol car. When confronted with that fact, he admitted that he did in fact leave the residence during the afternoon of the 18th. When questioning Judy about Larry leaving the property, she stated that afternoon, Larry told her that he was going to Glendale to check on his private car." So now he's kind of mincing words with detectives where things get a little slimy at that point, you know?
Dicey.
Why? Yeah, dicey's a better word. But then the wife chimes into his defense. "It makes me angry that the state police turn everything I say around. They're constantly looking for inconsistencies in anything I say. I know that whatever I tell them, or whenever I tell them something, they're not going to believe me anyway. They're just going to disregard it." So,
and this is so ironic. You'll find out why soon enough, that this is such a bit of irony, where she's all defending him and all of that.
So 7 weeks into the investigation, the detectives finally confronted Larry. Quoting Larry, "They expressed the opinion that I had accidentally shot or killed my son, and then worrying about my job and standing in the community, concealed that fact, and I answered that that's not what happened, but I could see how that's possible. Being objective, I said I could see how they could have happened upon that. And I said that's possible, because anytime you fire a gun, anything can happen. But we looked, and Tommy wasn't down there, and we didn't find a body, and we didn't move a body. But I said it's possible, and I'm still living with that." End quote. Larry Gibson claimed that he jogged for 47 minutes. Now, what happened during those 47 minutes became the focal point of the affidavit filed by the Oregon State Police. The account outlines one possible theory, which authorities believe accounts for the time gaps and other inconsistencies in Larry's story. Larry Gibson claimed that when he fired off at the cat ran off into the weeds, and he assumed that he missed. A dead cat was, however, found in that area. A forensic examination found that the cat was shot through the heart and lungs. The theory states that the bullet passed through the cat and struck Tommy as he played nearby. Unaware that his son had been shot, Larry began his job. He claims that he covered his jog, not his job, my bad, typo there. He began his jog. He claims that he covered a distance of 2.5 miles in 47 minutes. Investigators determined that Larry jogged for just over 1 mile in fact, which should have only taken about 18 to 20 minutes. Quoting again the lieutenant, "We are concerned for that 20 minutes that Larry can't account for. Investigators feel that when Larry discovered the body of Tommy, he panicked and spent the next 30 minutes cleaning up the site and hiding the body, possibly in his patrol car. When he returned home, Larry had been gone for 47 minutes. He claimed to have been jogging that whole time, and while people were out searching for Tommy, Larry drove away in his patrol car with Tommy in the trunk." That's the theory. Quoting Larry again, Larry had a lot to say in this segment, boy. He was talking a lot.
That's a pretty grisly image. You know, they don't really show it, but I mean, there's enough that they say that it gets your imagination to come up with something that's probably even more horrific than anything that they could show on the show.
According to Larry, the whole thing is ridiculous. The whole situation is ridiculous. There is nothing to base their investigations. I have already passed a polygraph. There's no forensic evidence. There's nothing. And my whole feeling from the beginning that I didn't mind them investigating me because there's nothing to find. I didn't do anything. Have at it. But at the same time, look for my son because he's still missing. And that's what he had to say. So
yeah. And I mean, he was very convincing.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that definitely did jump out at me when I saw the segment for the first time and watched it again. I mean, I didn't really think I really did believe him. I didn't think he was guilty.
Larry claims 2 reports support his claim that his son was abducted. Approximately 2 weeks after Tommy disappeared, and this is some lady named Jeanette, a neighbor. She says, approximately 2 weeks after Tommy disappeared, I had gone to bed that night. I don't know why, but I began to think about it, and I had seen a car. I was going to the bank, and I had stopped at the end of this road to see if it was clear, and to the left there was this old vehicle coming by, and there was 2 people, and they were more like silhouettes, and I pulled behind it. And I noticed the license plate wasn't where it should have been. It was in the upper or the lower left-hand side of the rear view mirror instead of on the back where it should have been. The vehicle turned off the main road and turned down the road where Tommy and Larry lived. But then this same lady was interviewed by the FBI and she said she saw nothing suspicious. Shortly after Jeanette reported seeing the suspicious vehicle, Larry's daughter Karen remembered a different experience. She said she saw people talking to Tommy in the driveway, saw a woman with a ponytail and a man with a beard walk up and take Tommy, and described an ugly yellow truck with a license plate in the back window. Karen was interviewed the day that Tommy went missing and 2 other times, and she, quote, never mentioned a vehicle, but she did say Tommy was playing outside that morning. So Larry's coming up with all these kind of reports that are not only not substantiated, but they're in direct contradiction of what the interviews that actually took place stated.
Yeah.
But Larry chimes in yet again. State police are saying that I'm coaching my little girl on what to say. There are no facts anywhere to indicate that my little girl is telling lies. There are no facts anywhere that suggest that my son is dead. And there is no fact anywhere that points to my son's disappearance. Those are the facts, yet we still live under this cloud of suspicion. Soon after Tommy disappeared, authorities received a mysterious letter from someone named Spot in the Road. They believe the author has vital information on Tommy's disappearance. The police continue to investigate all avenues of this case, including the abduction. Mike, now, would you like to do the honors of dropping this update?
I can definitely drop this update. A few years after Tommy's disappearance, Larry's daughter changed her story to say that she had witnessed that her father had hit him. He was arrested in April 1994, convicted of second-degree manslaughter, and sentenced to 3 years in prison. I'm like, 3 years? Isn't that a paltry sentence?
So, looking back at all this, it was all bullshit. Larry weaved a very lovely and convincing tale of bullshit. He had, in all actuality, beaten his son until he stopped moving. That's what the daughter said. And then Karen, Ann Gibbons' estranged wife, Judy, so she left his ass at this point, testified against him in court.
And she was the one that's saying, I don't know what they're talking about with my husband.
Yeah, she was the one defending him and saying, I'm tired of them misconstruing my words. And then it all comes out. It all comes to light. And people are made fools of. And, you know, it's a whole mess.
It was like when I first saw it, my jaw dropped because I was like, what? What?
But probably the biggest atrocity of this whole thing, second-degree manslaughter, 3 years in prison. Are you fucking kidding me? He beats his kid until he stops moving. Now, granted, that's what the girl said. There may or may not be evidence to support that.
Yeah, so it might have been a case of he shot at the cat, and the bullet went through the cat and killed the kid.
The reason why he only spent 3 years in jail might be, and they didn't mention this, might be because they never found a body.
Yeah, they never did. They still haven't found a body.
Well, then if that's the case, I understand the 3 years. Because she changes her story, and they're already suspecting that he's guilty, and they go, boom, good enough for me. You're under arrest, buddy.
So it's one of those things that's like, did he really do it? Or is it just they changed? But why would they change their story? What did they have to gain? But then it was the estranged wife, so maybe she wants to screw over Larry, you know, and that's the best way she could think of. You know, that's the best thing that she can think of to do that. It's just, I don't know. Like this definitely does leave you asking more questions.
Without a body,
even after.
Without a body, there's no way of knowing, because the theory that and you know, this is some good old boy network shit again, because if this was just some average nobody, then his ass would have already been in prison for 20 years for murdering his son. But the fact that he's a cop and he's in the small town good old boy network, they're giving him all this fucking leeway. And, you know, they need the body to prove their theory of what they think happened. They're trying to say that this was an accident. Nobody in the police force was saying that he did it on purpose. They're trying to say it's an accident, and even with that, he won't cop up to it and say, yeah, you know, it was an accident. He's still saying, no, I'm completely innocent.
Yeah, because I mean that's they want to save face. I mean that looks really bad. That's a bad mark on the sheriff's department.
True.
To have the deputy sheriff basically accused or actually convicted of murdering, you know, or killing his kid. So I mean, yeah, I don't know. It's one of those like I'm like part of it. I mean, when you read off his quotes without seeing him deliver those lines, in my head automatically, when I'm not associating those quotes with this person who's a very amicable person who seems to really know how to communicate very well, and maybe knows how to manipulate people pretty well as well. Then I started to think about, it does kind of sound like he might be making up some things. Oh, there's people in a truck that took Tommy, took Tommy away. The whole discrepancies with the time. He said, "Oh, it's 47 minutes to the run, and then only like 20 minutes for the run." Really?
Yeah, but my question is, how do they know that he says he jogged like 2-point-something miles, and then they say he actually jogged one?
Yeah, how do they know that?
How do they know?
Yeah.
How do they know?
Yeah.
I mean, they didn't say in the show how they determined that. Probably strategically they didn't say, because they don't want to give out the details of how people,
the other thing is the daughter said changing her story. Now it's not just the mother who changes her story, the estranged wife, it's the daughter that changes her story.
When you change
what would she have to gain there? When
you change your story from a man with a beard and a woman with a ponytail grab the
white
son,
truck.
Which is the story the dad wanted to be true. It's the scenario the dad wanted. When you change that from daddy beat the kid till he was lifeless, there might have been coaching involved on either side. It depends. Like, it depends on what Judy had to gain from divorcing this guy, and any kind of monies that could be gotten from painting him as this murderer. There could be coaching on Larry's side to make the daughter seem, to make Tommy seem like he was abducted. The fact that there is no body is is kind of the whole crux of why this is still...
It's troubling.
Yeah. Because if they find a body and there's no bullet holes in him and no evidence of being shot, then the dude's a fucking murderer. He beat him to death. If there is a bullet, then they're gonna go...
But my thing is, like, if it was an accident, then just fess up to it. I mean, even if you're a deputy sheriff and you accidentally shot your kid because you lost track of your kid, it's a tragic story. But if you have the proof, if you have the evidence, I mean, that people are going to forgive you. People are going to be all right. They're going to be like, okay, you were trying to shoot the cat. We understand, accidents happen.
Right.
The fact that if it was an accident and he's just completely denying everything, that is very suspicious. And his body still hasn't been found. So, I mean, I don't really believe this theory of some guy with a beard and some girl with a ponytail grabbing the kid out of a pickup and shoving him into a pickup truck and then driving off somewhere. And then we never hear from these people again. Yes, sometimes this happens with kidnappings. I think there was a recent one where this baby was actually found recently. Wasn't it around your...
Yeah, uh-huh.
Your way?
Yep. A baby who was kidnapped was recently, just recently, 17 years later, returned to the rightful parents, and
so sometimes it happens, but that's a rarity.
Well, actually, I've been hearing because I'm an uncle now and all that. My niece and all. I was hearing from my brother's wife that when you take the baby home for the first time, not to put out balloons on the mailbox, not to make any kind of fanfare about it, because people steal babies, apparently.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know that was a thing.
Well, I remember the segment from one of the... I forgot exactly what season it was. It was one of the earlier seasons where these babies, this woman... would go in and corner mothers after they grab their babies at night, and then they'd take them home and then put them, pointed a gun at them and took their babies.
Yeah, and even, they were telling him, my brother's wife on the way home from the hospital, you're supposed to... You're supposed to have some kind of ID or something on you or something, because if you get pulled over, there's no way that you can honestly prove that it's your baby.
Yeah.
Some crazy shit that I never even thought about. So, you're really not... It's really like a no-no now to advertise, new babies, kind of...
But, I mean, with stuff like this, where an older kid, and a kid is 6 years old, your 2-year-old kid is kidnapped... Rarely does the kid end up being found years later, unless the kid is dead. So, I don't know. I think he's guilty, but the remains have not been located. So, it's really hard to say with a definitive, decision to say definitively Larry did it.
Yeah, it's one of those up in the air ones for sure. But
it's different because when I first saw the segment, I didn't know this extra stuff, so I thought it was just, oh, he did it. What a fucking asshole. But then, when I read into it a little bit more, I'm like, oh, okay, maybe there's a little, I don't know, it's up in the air now. I think he did it, but I can't say for sure that he did. Now, he lives in Montana now, and he's a country music performer.
Are you serious?
Yep.
No. That's what it says on the update?
He sings country music, yeah.
Dude, that's fucking nuts.
Yeah.
Well, I shot my son when I tried to kill a cat. The law was on my back. I ain't got time for that. What the fuck?
And what's even crazier is the image of Tommy Gibson was actually used in Soul Asylum's 1993 hit Runaway Train.
Jeez, that's crazy. Well, that's that case. I don't really have anything else to say about it.
I don't either.
I think it's got to kind of be a short one this week because I got.
What do you think? Do you think he did it?
I Do I think that he killed his son? Do I think he hit? I don't think he did it on purpose. I don't think he killed his son on purpose. However it happened, even if he did hit him, and he might have been embarrassed to admit that, oh yeah, I beat my son. I think however his son died was an accident.
Yeah.
But the fact that he seemed a little...
That's kind of what I'm leaning towards as well.
But there is a psychotic part about him that he seems just a little too easy to live with himself on camera. Yeah. That's how he appeared. He was living with himself a little too easily despite all the things that had happened.
Yeah.
So on that note, we're going to have to end it a little early today or tonight or whatever. I got a gig that I got to go to.
I got to feed myself.
Oh, that's another thing I got to do. If you'd like to become fans of our Facebook page, you can like us on facebook.com/uncovering unexplained mysteries. And you guys have kind of turned that page into your own thing. It's your own little meeting spot for all things Unsolved Mysteries, which is cool. And the podcast, not just the show. Because it's not just about the show. You listen for us, too, I think. I'd like to think at this point. I already plugged all the other stuff. And with all that being said, I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your week. And
enjoy season 2 or enjoy the rest of season 1 if you're still watching it. And we hope you enjoyed the podcast.
Good night.
See ya.